This is the Triple Blow, the immediate precursor to the Plusblow 4. It's a pump-action blowgun that loads 3 darts from 3 magazines into 3 barrels each time you cycle the pump grip. Oddly enough, this was my first 3D printed blaster that used Nerf magazines, and the systems on the Plusblow 4 were all based on this. The Triple Blow was operated by pulling back and then returning the pump grip on the front. This will load 1 dart from each of the 3 magazines into each of the 3 barrels. The process can be repeated to load multiple darts into each barrel for a shotgun effect. Then, the darts can be fired 1 barrel at a time by blowing into the corresponding flexible tubes. The original plan included a trigger-operated valve directing air from a single mouthpiece, but the Triple Blow became unusably inefficient with all the extra plumbing that required. So I left it with short, separate mouthpieces. It worked, but firing each barrel required rotating the blaster 120 degrees. I stopped working on it at this point, and then I eventually gave it away. In search of something more practical, I developed a single Nerf magazine-fed blowgun. This was the Plusblow 4, and the files are available on Thingiverse. Like the Triple Blow, operating the pump grip feeds a dart from the magazine into the barrel, and you can do this as many times as you like before blasting the darts by blowing into the flexible tube. The biggest improvement was the 9/16 of an inch by 5/8 of an inch nylon barrel, which was loose enough for the fattest of Nerf darts. It also made it seal better because I could drill out a 5/8 of an inch hole much more precisely than a 27/32 of an inch with the tools at my disposal. The seal is still limited by the 1/2 inch piston rod because if you leave the hole for the darts at exactly a 1/2 an inch, the darts won't easily fit through, and so I compromised to make it a little bigger. The seal is still plenty good enough for stock dart performance, and in fact, you don't want to blow hard with this blaster. A gentle breath is plenty, and more power will just degrade accuracy. Nerf blasters use this cutout to hold on to the magazine. I didn't want to use that because it seems like I could easily go in too far and interfere with the feed. Instead, I wanted to use this ridge around the magazine. Reaching it is tricky without a massively large magazine well, but what I came up with was a pair of arms on hinges connected to an elastic ellipse that would expand to allow the magazine in, but close shut on it once the ridge had passed. Releasing the magazine was achieved by squeezing the ellipse on the long axis, spreading the arms. The magazine system worked well enough and looked super cool, but it did involve some vulnerable and crunchy parts. I surprisingly only broke 1 ellipse on the Triple Blow during my adventures with this system, but you can imagine just by looking at it all the ways it could get crushed and broken. Not long ago, I saw Captain Slug's Caliburn blaster, and was impressed with how simply and easily it was able to hold magazines without wonky bullshit. Then I realized that my super cool and innovative magazine system was actually kind of terrible. I do plan to revisit the Plusblow 4 in the near future to make a more robust and compact magwell, using a system much more akin to what the Caliburn, and in fact most Nerf blasters, use, while still keeping the push-through style of breech that allows for multiple loading. At first glance, the Plusblow 5 looks like it has 4 barrels, but in fact it has 2 barrels and 2 magazine tubes, which is evident in this particular case because it uses the translucent nylon tubes for both the magazine tubes and the barrels. It's actually able to load 2 shots at once with a single priming motion, which, like many prior Plusblows, involves tilting the blaster upwards so that darts can fall down a tube. Then we rotate this back drum around the mouthpiece. Doing that moves darts from behind the magazine tubes over to behind the barrel. The mouthpiece, somewhat confusingly, actually has 4 ports to blow into. 2 of those ports at any given time will be leading to the magazine tubes, which won't do you any good. However, it's necessary to have these extra ports in order to use only a single rotary seal at the front rather than needing a rotary seal here and here. Loading 2 shots at once gives the Plusblow 5s an edge on refire rate compared to earlier Plusblows and in fact many other blasters. The double barrel and double magazine system also has the benefit of giving the user a backup shot. Another advantage of the double barrel, and more specifically the double magazine system, is that although ammo capacity is still related to length, you get twice as many darts per amount of length of the blaster. As was the case with most of the early Plusblows, loading is accomplished by pushing darts past a duct tape flap that allows darts in but doesn't let them fall out. The first version of the Plusblow 5 represented a return to the fat-headed darts. And after building and playing with the Plusblow 4s, I still wasn't satisfied with the performance of the Elite darts or even the Elite suction cup darts. This particular Plusblow 5 was designed for Busby suction cup darts, which are slightly shorter than the Nerf Tagger darts. Unfortunately, Nerf was not selling the Nerf Tagger dart anymore, but Busby was still selling their suction cup darts, so even though I preferred the Taggers, I made this blaster for the suction cup darts. Although this looks like 4 pipes of the same type, they are in fact 2 different varieties of half-inch PVC pipe. Half-inch Schedule 40 PVC pipe is used as a barrel material. Large-headed darts make a nice airtight seal with the Schedule 40 PVC. The thin wall PVC used for the magazines has a much larger bore, and although this doesn't form a pneumatic seal, it's not needed for the magazines, and the larger bore allows the darts to slide down more freely. Dart holding drum revolves around a large 1/4-inch bolt like this one. The bolt has an improvised engagement for a flathead screwdriver on one side, and on the other side a pair of nuts held in place by an unholy alliance of superglue and electrical tape hold the 2 revolving drums close enough together that not much air can leak out and spoil the seal. This first Plusblow 5 had the range and accuracy of a 2-foot blowgun, while still having a 24 dart ammo capacity. Unfortunately, in practice, this blaster had problems with ammo compatibility. There were 2 problems. The biggest one was that, although Nerf's fat suction cup darts were not widely sold as a standalone item, they were what came with most Nerf blasters. Although in most cases they used a different color scheme than Busby, there were exceptions. Unfortunately, as rare as these exceptions were, it only takes one to jam up this blaster. The amount of effort to unjam these blasters varies dramatically, but in many cases requires having a 1/4-inch, somewhat flexible rod that is longer than this blaster. This is theoretically not a big deal if you have your own ammo stash and you just shoot your own ammo. However, personally, I like to scavenge darts as I'm playing. At a Nerf event where everyone's darts are on the ground, you can't know exactly what you're picking up. The other problem, which was somewhat less common, although the Busby suction cup darts were generally a very high quality construction, there was occasionally a dart that would have a little bit of extra glue around the head. For the intended use of these darts, that wouldn't be a problem. However, when we're using these in blowguns, we need that head diameter to stay accurate to its nearly 5/8 inch nominal size. In order to promote compatibility with standard Nerf darts, I also made a version of this blaster, the Plusblow 5N, with the N indicating that the blaster would work with any N-Strike compatible Nerf darts. The Plusblow 5N was basically the same idea as the Plusblow 5, but scaled down for the smaller bore darts. Switched to a nylon tube available from McMaster-Carr, which has a 5/8 outer diameter and a 9/16 inch inner diameter. This is an extra loose fit for the nominally half-inch darts that Nerf uses in most of their blasters. It's so loose that it's actually acceptable as a magazine material as well as a barrel material in this context. Another more minor change associated with this revision was the addition of a recessed area for the nuts. These loose-fitting nylon tubes work great as blowgun barrel material and pretty good as magazine material as well. However, these nylon tubes are much more flimsy than even the thin-wall PVC pipe. That made the addition of this foregrip a necessity. Otherwise, holding the blaster would squeeze on the nylon tubes and bend them over time. This Plusblow also has a little extra piece of plate and some duct tape work in order to give the blowgun some indexing. This doesn't really work in practice because although it does snap to a location close to alignment, you still need to use your hands to hold the blaster in a better alignment in order to properly fire. You may have noticed me struggling a bit during the rate of fire demonstration. That was largely thanks to this widget, which serves no useful purpose whatsoever. The next Plusblow that I built was almost identical to the last one, except being in a shorter size. This was because at the time, the best darts that a Plusblow 5N could fire were the Nerf Elite suction cup darts, which, although slightly better than the Elite darts, were not particularly accurate or effective at long range. So, the extra power afforded by the long barrel length of the earlier Plusblow 5Ns was largely wasted, and actually reduce the effective range. The lower power of the shorter Plusblow is also a bit of an advantage, as it makes the blaster more appropriate for indoor and more casual play. Although not a feature of this Plusblow, one incident occurred during the construction of it that changed the way I made Plusblows in the future. As I glued down the nuts and put the blaster together for the first time, there was a very large gap in here, which made the blaster seal terribly. Unfortunately, the construction method I used at the time involved gluing two nuts together on the bolt, and as you can see, there's not very good access to try and wrench those free. In order to fix this, I had to slide my hacksaw blade into the cylinder gap and actually saw the bolt in half, use a new bolt, and try again. Now fortunately, on the second try, I did a much better job, and this one has a very tight cylinder gap. It seals quite well. However, it taught me a lesson that wasn't necessarily a great idea as a method for me to build all of these. This fourth iteration of the Plusblow 5 is currently my favorite. Aside from having a way cooler color scheme than the last Plusblow, it's assembled differently in order to avoid using glue and potentially needing to saw a bolt out. This Plusblow uses a spring to compress the cylinder gap instead of just an exact positioning of the nuts. This means that I don't have to glue the nuts in place, and this also means that the nut winds up somewhere relatively accessible and easy to adjust if need be. Another side effect of the spring compression is that now you can pull apart the cylinder gap. Occasionally, when you have a jam, this can be very helpful to clear it more quickly. This is particularly helpful if you have an issue caused by a slightly too long or slightly too short dart. For the most part, these blasters are surprisingly tolerant of differences in length between darts. Probably about a plus or minus 1 millimeter margin of error where you can get this system to work. Although when you're towards the outside of it, you will notice some problems. I have found that you want to err on the side of pinching the head of the dart by making your cylinder a bit too short rather than making the cylinder too long so that the entire dart falls in and a tiny bit of the foam tail of the next dart. The foam tail will get pinched and jam up the cylinder rotation mechanism. However, the rubber heads, surprisingly including suction cup heads, will kind of just mush out of the way as needed. So far, this blaster has been tested and works well with standard streamline darts, elite suction cup darts, the new Busby N-Strike compatible suction cup darts, ACC darts, and my current favorite, the men gun darts with the funny waffle tips. There are a couple reasons why I prefer aftermarket darts for this blaster as opposed to the off-the-shelf elite darts. First reason is that a lot of the aftermarket darts are quite a bit more accurate than the Nerf Elite darts or even the Nerf Elite suction cup darts. Second reason is that for some reason the Nerf Elite darts are much more likely to have glue wrapped around the outside of the head, which can cause a jam, than the Chinese knockoffs are. This can be dealt with easily by going through your darts in advance and just peeling off extra glue where you notice it. It's always visible if it's severe enough to cause a problem. However, I don't want to go through my darts before I use them. So far, these men gun darts have not had any gluing problems that cause compatibility issues. For reasons of ammo capacity, I also wanted to try making a version of the Plusblow 5 that used these shorter artifact darts and also these mostly harmless arms silly domes of my own manufacture. These cost 2 or 3 cents each in China. With shipping, if you order them in bulk, you can get them around 5 cents a piece. They're more accurate than a regular Nerf dart when it comes to accuracy at high speeds, but still not as accurate as the MHA silly domes or other homemade alternatives. The only design change necessary to accept artifact darts was simply to make the dart drum in the back shorter. Although this old Plusblow 5N only holds 16 darts, this Plusblow 5A for artifact darts holds 32 darts when it's fully loaded. I've also replaced the duct tape flaps in this case with a simple rotating dart blocking device. Normally, this sits over the darts so that if you tilt the blaster upside down, nothing falls out. But if you want to load darts, all you have to do is twist this in front of the barrels. Now, you can't shoot like this, and if you tilt your blaster the wrong way, you lose all your darts. As long as you can remember to turn the little device back into the closed position before using your blaster, you should be good to go. Although this is technically a downgrade since I do have to do something in order to start loading darts, I consider it an upgrade because when you do load darts, you're not pushing past any sort of flaps, so it's a little bit easier. And also, there's just no duct tape components required. I did get the length slightly wrong on this dart chamber, and so there's a little bit of a pinch every time that you twist to load a new dart. It is pinching on the heads, and I've confirmed that it's not damaging them, but it's definitely a sign that if I were going to do this again, this dart chamber should be maybe 1/2 to 3/4 millimeters longer. So it should be pretty obvious that I like this basic design and I am going to keep working with it. The most obvious change that people have asked for is to make these fully indexing so that they snap into place. As it stands, in order to fire these well, you have to use your hand to hold the flats together while you're holding the blaster, and that keeps everything perfectly aligned. However, I am afraid that any indexing mechanism I add will take away from the intrinsic simplicity and robustness of this blaster design. There's really no vulnerable external parts to this blaster. Everything exposed is big chunky parts. Unfortunately, many of the obvious mechanisms to make this index would involve making it quite a bit more complicated and probably more expensive and less robust. Also, when you rotate this bottom drum, you can feel any resistance if there is a dart that hasn't quite fallen all the way down, and you can respond to that and avoid chopping up darts and causing a jam. With an indexing mechanism, you wouldn't be able to feel and respond to those things as easily, and so if you made a mistake by indexing without shaking a dart all the way down, the results might be much worse. So I haven't given up on making these index, and I acknowledge that that would make these blasters easier to use for some people, but it's not my top priority. The Plusblows 6 arose from my desire to implement a mechanism similar to what was used in the Plusblows 5, but only with a single barrel so that it would be easier to adapt to hamps, springers, and other blasters that don't need two barrels. Like the Plusblows 5, this feed mechanism takes darts from behind the magazine tube to behind the barrel tube, but instead of having a rotary mechanism, there's simply a linear slide activated by this bolt here. This extra wooden tape is a kludge necessary because I did not put in the correct travel distance for this bolt, and so it will actually go too far and not allow a dart in. In order to get a good seal and low friction action, this entire mechanism is all printed using PETG. PETG warps much less than most other 3D printing plastics, so you can get those perfectly flat base surfaces. The Plusblows 6, as it stands, is a little awkward to use because it doesn't have any foregrip, and these tubes, as noted before, are quite flimsy. However, I'm confident that if I do add a handle and fix the travel here, this will be a fun and competitive blaster. I also look forward to adapting something like this to a hamp or a springer. This is the Plusblows 7, and some of you may recognize it as the stand gun from my earlier videos. I initially didn't include this as part of the Plusblows series because, unlike my other Plusblows, I didn't really invent anything to make this. The Plusblow is a fully automatic blowgun using short darts, like these Artifact Blaster ModWorks darts I have in here. You reload the Plusblows 7 by taking off the magazine tube and just putting darts in the open top. Unfortunately, the future is not very bright for these blasters. In the stand gun instructional video, I advised using Schedule 80 pipe for the barrel. Unfortunately, not long after moving, I learned that the availability of the looser Schedule 80 varies by region. And since it doesn't officially exist, it's not something that you can really request. So if you're not lucky enough to live in an area where you can go to a hardware store and look through their pipe and find some looser than average pipe, you need to order this nylon stuff from McMaster-Carr. It costs about $1 a foot, but it can only be bought in 5-foot segments, and you have to pay for shipping from the nearest McMaster-Carr warehouse. This is the other disaster that has befallen the stand gun. These Ys used to have a round opening all the way through, but now the hole has become D-shaped. It appears that Spears has changed their mold for these Ys, and it's not good for us. Small as it may be, darts don't easily pass over that hump without an extra shake. While it's possible to modify these, 3D print or otherwise build your own Y, in the Nerf community we've grown accustomed to just paying $1.50 for these and using them as is. Although it's not a big extra complication if you're working on an already complicated homemade blaster, for something like the stand gun, needing to do something more sophisticated for the hopper will double or triple the amount of effort needed to produce one blaster. It hasn't become impossible by any means, but it's not going to be worthwhile to do so for nearly as many people as before. On a related note, check out the awesome rate of fire on my long strike. This is a sneak preview of the Plusblows 8.